Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where we talk about real estate matters that matter to you. We are live here at Linda Craft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show, we have myths about the real estate market. Lots of myths are out there, but we've got 4 myths. Recently, what happened was that Realtor.com put out a article that was kind of interesting on some myths about the housing market that can affect buyers and sellers. Well, my guest, who is no stranger to the show, Dwayne Reece, he's an expert listing specialist and buyer specialist here at Linda Craft Team Realtors. And he decided to say, hey, let's take a look at these, but let me add maybe 1 or 2 things that this article isn't talking about myths that affect buyers and sellers. So you're going to want to pay attention to the show. By the way, give us a thumbs up. You're watching us on YouTube. We'd love to see you give us a thumbs up. That'd be awesome. Wherever you're at, you can always write in your questions right now. Dwayne, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jay. I'm glad to be with you today.
So 4 myths.
4 myths
of the real estate market.
Correct. I have a question for you, though.
Sure.
What is the difference between a myth and a conspiracy theory? Because we hear that term talked about.
Oh. Well, that's an interesting question because I'm like going, well, conspiracy theories, we typically go, right? We say, these people are crazy.
Right.
Right. With a myth, we kind of go, well, those people are crazy too. So
exactly. Well, the reason
why do you bring that up?
All right. The reason I raise that question is because we hear that bandied about quite a bit. Conspiracy theories, we do hear myths and we hear mythology. And the reason I bring that up is because you just defined it really well. There's not a lot of difference between a myth and a conspiracy theory.
Right.
Because one of the things that I've long said to my wife, Erica, in real estate and friends that know me well is that I wish that real estate transactions had a 2-minute Netflix trailer in front of them.
Okay, so why?
Because if I could watch the 2-minute trailer, I'd know if I really wanted to watch the rest of the show. All right. And I'd really know if I wanted to work through this transaction or work with this person who might be a myth holder or a conspiracy theorist, if you will. So that's where I was going with that. So
okay. It's interesting because this market, has fluctuated we come out of the pandemic, things got weird,
very weird.
And then we saw a little bit of a kind of you said it first on a show a couple of years ago, and that was it normalized. You were the first one to say that it normalized.
Right.
When you were on the show, when we started, and I thought that was a great term that you used. But then the market started to do some funny things.
Yep.
Steve Kruger came on the show and talked about people who were moving from other cities and states,
right,
and how that affects, of course, our triangle.
Sure.
And also we talked about some of the cities where they're seeing an influx,
right,
which has also caused some issues with, housing.
Sure.
So some of these are maybe not myths, or maybe they're partial truths.
Usually that's a great term you hit on, partial truths, because that's actually what myths and conspiracy theories have in common.
Right.
They have partial truth.
Right.
But they're not complete truth.
Right.
And everybody, think about this, everybody processes truth through their own eyeglasses,
right,
their own lenses.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
The reason something might resonate with me is because I'm processing it out of my own background, my own experience level, my own knowledge. And the reason partial truth resonates is I think I've got all the truth, but none of us all ever have all the truth.
Right.
Or everything's partial truth.
And it may not be your own glasses. If you're like me, it's through your own contacts.
Exactly. Yeah. You got an eye doctor appointment coming up, right?
Yesterday I had it. Yes.
Good.
Yesterday. So they gave me the right prescription.
Right.
Don't know that I've got the truth right yet.
You'll get there. You'll get there. All right. Didn't mean to throw us off track.
No.
Conspiracy
so let's go myth number 4.
Myth number 4. The housing market is about to crash just like it did 2008, 2009.
I've heard this.
Yeah. I've gotten that for probably the last 18 months. When's it going to crash? When's it going to crash?
Right.
I have been consistent with my answer. That is a complete myth.
Okay.
If we did fact or fiction, it's fiction. And I will get in discussions and conversations with people. I don't like to debate, certainly don't like to argue,
sure,
but I have a really strong belief that the market's not going to crash, and it's nothing like 2008. And I'll give you just a couple of reasons why it's nothing like 2008. Number one, the problem in 2008 was really not a housing crisis as much as it was a lending crisis. Okay. And so a lot of people, and that's not casting shade at lenders or mortgage companies, but it was a lot easier to qualify for a mortgage in 2004 to 2007, 2008 than it is today. The process is much more restricted, much more restrictive, much more defined, much more organized. So the lending process is in a much better condition this time around than it was then. The second piece that was going on in 2008 was that there was so much supply. Builders were continuing to build, and people were continuing to buy because they could. It was easy to get a loan. It was easy to find a house back then, because when you have so much supply, the demand did not outstrip supply then. What we have going on today is a classic case of supply and demand. We have way too little supply, and we still, in spite of interest rates, we still have strong demand. It's not as strong as it was during the pandemic years, but it's still staying strong. People have accepted the new normal of the interest rate environment that we're in. You talked about normalizing. Well, I really believe people have started to normalize their behavior relative to interest rates.
Yeah,
I had a closing yesterday afternoon, and looked at the young man across the table, and he had a higher interest rate than he would have anticipated when we started looking a year ago. But I was able to point out to him, and now the first house I bought a year before he was born, but my interest rate was higher than his. Okay. The interest rate he locked in yesterday, my interest rate was a point higher than his was when I bought my first house in 1996. So I do think people are normalizing to the interest rate environment. There's a lot of hope from lenders that I speak with that interest rates are going to start to decline. But it's a number 4 myth is just that. It's a myth. The housing market is not about to crash like it did in 2008, 2009.
Great points. I love that. I totally agree with you. Okay. Myth number 3.
Myth number 3, housing is in a recession.
Ooh.
We hear that word bandied about, right?
Yeah.
And
is that a partial truth, or is there some truth in that, or no?
That was actually true 6 months ago.
Really? Okay.
It's not true today. The housing market was in a recession, and a lot of people don't even recognize that. Those of us who are in the industry, we felt the recession last year. Now, I'm not talking about the overall economy. The overall economy is still humming along. The Fed just reported GDP for the second quarter and revised the first quarter. We're still in a growing economy, overall GDP. The Fed just raised the interest rate for, I think, the 12th time.
11 and 17 months.
11 and 17 months. There's, speculation of whether it'll be number 12 coming up before the end of the year. But the economy is staying strong. But the reason I say that the housing market was in a recession, and it was from July of last year until January of this year, because think about what a recession is. A recession in the overall economy is when the GDP contracts in 2 consecutive quarters. Well, that happened in the housing market because last year, June of 2022, we hit a peak in median house price. Sorry, messed that up. Median house price. We hit a peak in June. It started to decline in July. It declined 7 straight months, and around January, late February, it started to come back up. And the decline from the peak in June of 2022 to the trough in January was about 9%. That's not a crash. That is a decline. But we are back up from that trough, back up 12% in the median house price nationally. Now, in different parts of the country, that number could be different. We didn't see quite that decline here in the Triangle. We did see a decline in median home price, but it's back up and staying strong. So myth is housing in a recession. That's a myth, but it was in a recession. So you got to look past tense.
So some people may be holding on to that a little bit, but again, it goes back to your previous point, and that is because we have such low inventory, right? I mean, we are driving prices up.
We absolutely are.
And you and I talked about this before the show. Builders can't even keep up.
They can't keep up. And this is I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a point I wanted to make. If you look at the builder confidence index, anytime the builder confidence index is below 50, that's a sign of a declining market. That's a sign of a little bit of apprehension among home builders. And when you look at some of the larger national builders, some of the larger national production builders that are publicly traded, you can kind of see that if you track their stock price. Well, sometime around March of this year, the builder confidence index went back above 50. Anything above 50 is confidence. And I don't need to look at that index I drive around every day of my
Right.
life showing houses, and every time I'm out showing houses, I'll try to take a different route than Waze wants to tell me to go. And every time I do that, I find a new subdivision coming out of the ground.
Which is
And,
really interesting, isn't it? I
yeah.
mean, they're finding little nooks and crannies
Oh yeah. Yep.
that they
And,
that you don't see,
oh yeah.
that we didn't see. You know, all of a sudden you're driving by and you go, well, that was never there before.
Exactly. And it will shock me because I'll go, wow, how did they make that much progress
Right.
on that subdivision? Because
Right.
I was by here 3 months ago,
Right.
and I didn't know anything was happening.
Right.
And I remember a lesson, and Jay, you grew up on a farm in Nebraska,
Mhm.
but and I grew up in the mountains in North Carolina. But a phrase that my dad used to tell me way back when I was a kid: if you see dirt turning, the economy's growing.
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
that's really true.
And I see dirt turning. I see housing coming out of the
Right.
ground. I see the builder confidence index. We're not in a housing recession. We're not about to crash. We got builders trying their best to catch up with the demand that we have out there, and they're trying their best to put more supply on the table to really correct this shortage of supply that we're facing right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great way to dispel that myth, because I think you're absolutely right. Okay. So we've got myth number 4, myth number 3. Now we're down to myth number 2.
Myth number 2. Any guesses?
Gosh, let me see here. Myth number 2. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe something about interest rates, maybe.
Good guess. Good guess. Glad we had that conversation earlier. So myth number 2: as rates rise, home prices will drop.
Mm, and that's not happening.
That's not been happening. So if you can't look back over the last 12 months and realize that that is a myth and really a maybe masquerading as a conspiracy theory.
Right.
Yeah, home prices did decline, that little recession.
Right.
But that really was not as much driven by rates. Rates had some impact on that.
Right.
But it wasn't as much driven by rates as it was driven, in my opinion, by so many buyers having been artificially pulled forward in the housing market during the pandemic.
Gotcha.
A lot of people bought, a lot of people locked in low rates.
Mm.
They weren't going anywhere. They had the house that they
Right.
wanted. So we really didn't see, if we'd have seen the same correlation between the rise in rates and the decline in home values, it would have mirrored something way closer to 2008 than it did. And it's not. We saw a dip. We saw a slight dip, but rates have risen. Home prices leveled out, declined a little bit, and have risen straight back up. And frankly, we saw a plateau last fall in interest rates. Those have continued to climb, and home values has started to climb again in January of this year. So complete myth. They're not tracking 100% in lockstep by any means.
So I guess this leads to the question that maybe people want to hear, and that is, so can you say from your perspective that demand to purchase homes is still high?
Demand is absolutely still high. It 100% is. And supply is still staying at such record lows that we could have demand fall by 10%, and we still would not have enough supply. We literally need 25% greater supply than we have in our market, but even in a national market as well. So
yeah, I was at a conference this in Denver this past week with a number of top producing real estate professionals, and literally it didn't matter what market I asked. I said, "Is your market like our market?" And everybody was like, "Yeah, we just have no inventory."
Right.
And yet we've got buyers.
Right.
And so, we want to believe that this interest rate increase was going to impact buyers, but and maybe for a few it has, but it really has not stopped people from wanting to purchase a home.
No,
And I think we've hammered this message on about, I don't know how many shows, but it seems like weekly we hammer the message. You marry the home, you date the rate.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Right.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because that's one of the classic phrases.
Right.
If you fall in love with a house, my buyer yesterday was a perfect example of that. He's a first time home buyer. I remember that feeling. You want to move out of paying rent, and you want to be that first time home buyer. And he found a house that perfectly fit his needs for this time of life. And he married the house. and he's dating the rate. One of the things that the lender said, looked him in the eye yesterday and said to him, sometime in the next 12 to 15 months, I'm going to be reaching out to you because the rates are going to be back to where we need to refinance that, get you back into the rate that you want. And Jay, I actually had a friend listen to our podcast probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it was one that we had recorded way back. And he pointed out, he reminded me of something that I had actually forgotten that I said. And, interest rates are right now in the upper 6s, low 7s, some cases 7.25, but the interest rate on your rent payment is 100%.
Right.
If you're paying rent, interest rate on that is 100%.
Right.
That money's never coming back.
Well, you're building no wealth.
Building no wealth, building no equity, building no potential for price appreciation.
Right.
All of those great things that are wonderful about our housing economy.
Well, and I think the other thing that we forget, if you're a renter, is that, by the way, if housing prices are increasing, guess what your rent's about to do?
Going to increase.
It's going to increase. And I mean, we've seen rental prices, at least in the triangle here, rise.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Across the board.
Definitely. One of the routine conversations I have with people that reach out, they set up a home search on our website, or they somebody introduces me to a friend. The routine comment I'm hearing is that my rent just went up $200 a month. And I started looking around and doing the math, and even with the interest rates where they are, I can get a house for, it might be $100 more than what I'm paying in rent, but it's not that much. And I've got money. A lot of people are coming out of the pandemic years with a whole lot more cash on hand, and a lot more flush and less debt. So that's making it, a strong potential for moving from that renter to that homeowner. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a good thing. I think this is a good thing for, if you're a renter, that, check with your lender, see what you qualify for.
Right.
Then call you.
Absolutely.
After you get qualified.
And we've got preferred partner lenders that we can introduce them to.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we have a number of great lenders here that have been on the show.
Absolutely.
And they can really help you get pre-qualified, which you should do.
Sure.
I mean, you should get, by the way, you should get pre-qualified.
Right.
All right. Don't
100%.
Don't just go to a real estate professional and go, hey, I want to buy a house. No, do your homework first, go to a lender. Then after you get pre-qualified, then go contact Dwayne. Right. So that he knows exactly, because what's going to end up happening, and and this is just educational for folks. If you know what you can afford, because the other side, the listing agent, right, whoever that may be, is going to see a
pre-approval letter.
Level.
No offers getting accepted without it.
No offers getting accepted without it. So it's really, really important. And I can't emphasize this enough. If you're first-time home buyer, or even if you're not, and you go, well, I make plenty of money, they still are going to want to see a pre-approval letter. So make sure you get that done. All right, we're about to get to myth number 1.
All right, myth number 1. You ready?
And now, because we got to do the teaser.
Yeah.
Okay. We've had 3 myths. So let's go. Myth number 4 was.
All right. Myth number 4 is housing is about to crash like it did in 2008.
We disproved that. Myth number 3.
Correct. Myth number 3 was that housing has been in a recession.
Okay. And we disproved that. It's not now.
It was and is not now.
And then myth number 2.
As rates rise, home prices will drop.
And we
proved
that because that's not happening.
Correct.
Right. Including rents, including that. All right. So the big one. Myth. Are you ready, everybody? Myth
number 1.
Myth
number 1. Owners have such great interest rates, they will never sell their house.
Well, now this feels kind of okay, Dwayne, but this one feels kind of like a half truth to me.
Like we said, half truth.
I mean, because I feel like the people who have that 3% interest rate are a little reluctant to want to move.
I would agree with that, and that's why it is a partial truth, but it's still a myth.
Okay, well then, now you got to help me out. Why?
Here's why. Okay, I would agree. Interest rates were artificially record low for so long, and depending on where you want to put the cutoff mark at, 50% of the people in this country have an interest rate below 4%. Probably 75% have an interest rate below 5%. And those are such great rates. And it really does incentivize you, especially if you're happy with your home, to stay put. And I will agree partial truth that that's part of what created this slowdown in our market and the housing recession that we've been in from June of 2022 until about January of this year. But it is not locking people in place permanently. And here's why. There's 4 Ds. All right. People will still sell their house because they die.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And their heirs sell it.
Okay.
All right. That's the worst one.
We're not recommending that, by the way, but okay. Good.
Departure. They move outside the state either because they're
Relocation,
chasing grandkids or
right.
they're moving for jobs or whatever. So departure. The fourth one is divorce.
Okay.
Third one, I'm sorry, is divorce.
And we're not recommending that one either.
No, that's a difficult life change, but it does happen.
Right.
And that is reason for selling. And then the fourth one, all right, we had death, we had departure, we had divorce, downsizing. You're in more house than you really need. Right?
Well, that is true.
So,
I mean, that is true because, even as, I'm looking for my own personal situation, right? We moved, we had, a big house and we moved down into a townhouse.
Right.
Because we just
did the same thing.
We just didn't need it.
Right.
And it was a lot, it's not like, I mean, we took 2 of those rooms and were offices.
Sure.
Right. We still have 2 rooms that are offices.
Right.
Because we don't have any guests that come over.
No.
It's not like anybody's spending the night here. We don't have kids.
Correct.
We don't have dogs.
Right.
Right. And we just didn't need all that house.
Right.
And so I mean, you're right. I mean,
well,
downsizing is huge.
And here's the other thing I would say. The reason that one is a myth is that we are such a transient society. And for good or for bad, we're mostly discontent a lot of the time.
Yeah, true.
So we get really comfortable with the place, but then we get bored. We want something new. We want something shiny.
Sure.
We want something bigger. We want something smaller. So we're always about that change. And I'll go back to a statement I made earlier. I think people have normalized the interest rate environment that we're in right now. And I say that they've become accepting of where rates are right now. But I think there's also a lot of people that have hope and confidence that we're not going to stay in this interest rate environment. I would raise my hand as being one of those people that do think that we're going to see interest rate decline. And because people have already accepted where we're at, that decline in rates is going to be welcomed with a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and a lot of return into a more robust market. We moved from a really aggressive market to a more normal market, to even a little bit of a recessed market, and we're moving back toward a more robust market. I see that coming. I'll use this analogy. How much time do we have, Jay?
We've got about a minute and a half.
All right, we got about a minute and a half. Let me see if I can break this down real quick. Okay, the housing market in the pandemic years was like riding a jet ski. All right.
Okay.
A jet ski has no brakes, and it is great fun in the summer heat out on the lake. With the spray of the water and the wind. The pandemic market was like a jet ski. All right. The 6 months from June of 22 to 23 was like riding a cruise ship and watching it dock or turn. All right. I had an unplanned stop. My wife and I took a cruise this year, and we had an unplanned stop for a medical emergency in Miami. And because it was unplanned, there was another ship in the way. And so I had to watch the captain from the top turn our ship. It didn't happen in 30 seconds.
No,
it took about an hour.
No,
to
right,
get us out of Miami. So that was really interesting. And so that was the last, half of last year. Well, the market right now is, it's like riding a river in a rubber raft. And the reason I say that is that's what a buddy of mine we used to do growing up in the mountains of North Carolina. We'd ride the French Broad River, and you just kind of floating down the river.
Right,
and that's kind of been what the market's been like this first 6 months of the year. I see rapids coming. All right. I see rapids coming. And so when you're riding that rubber raft in the mountains of North Carolina, as soon as you hit a bridge or you hit some rapid water, you got picked up pace. And it was a lot of fun. And the market's about to pick up pace. We got those 4 myths. Is the market about to crash? That one's the biggest one I want to dispel.
Right.
So the market is about to take off, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Rates are going to decline. If it doesn't happen the next month or two, toward the end of the year, early next year, we're going to hit rapids. The time to buy is before we hit the rapids.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Because then we're going to see a lot of price. You're going to have a lot of competition.
Yep.
And so you're going to be paying over price if you want to get a home.
The one truth we've talked about 4 myths. You want one truth?
Sure.
The housing market is always changing.
Right. That's so true.
Always changing.
That's so true.
Yeah.
You've been great. This has been great.
Okay.
I love the 4 myths. Thank you for doing this. Tell people how to get a hold of you.
They can reach me at 919-623 3731, or my email moniker, Dwayner, Dwayne R at lindacraft.com.
Yeah, I tried it with just Dwayne.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It's bounced back.
It gets bounced back.
Yeah,
to me.
that happens routinely.
That's
People
awesome.
move it.
Awesome. Thanks for
All
being
right.
with us,
Thanks,
Dwayne.
Jay. Enjoyed it.
Hey, everybody, listen, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. Wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening, would you please give us a positive review? Let us know what you think of the show. Tell us some topics maybe that you have in mind that you'd like to know. We would love to discuss this on the show. As I say to you all over the world, you know what that is, right? Ciao, everybody.